Yeah, the one thing you need to do is the hardest thing to do. So often it's like, oh, the one thing I need to do, I need to take a break and go for a walk today. And that's the thing that you're too busy to do. Or, oh, I need to spend time on my CEO time today. And you're too busy and you break that appointment with yourself because a client calls or an emergency comes up. So it's often those things that are really important, but somehow you never get around to doing them. And so it's being able to prioritize that no matter what. And the thing is, it is hard. When you're stressed out, you're like, I don't have time to take a break. I don't have time to get more sleep. I spent 3 months getting 4 hours of sleep a night. And that's how I now know that like my number one priority is 8 hours of sleep a night. Well, I got a 13-month-old who never sleeps. So we're trying to figure out her sleep issues still. So I can't control that. But I go to bed early enough that if I was to sleep the whole night, I would get 8 or 9 hours because I know that affects every aspect of your life. Your income, your creativity, your health.
Welcome to the Web Design Business Podcast with your host, Josh Hall, helping you build a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey friends, great to have you here for another episode of the Web Design Business Podcast. Now, we've been talking a lot recently here on the show about mindset, but today I want to take a deep dive into a different area here, which is your gut. And we're going to talk more specifically about intuition and how to, have you ever made decisions in your business where you feel like your gut is telling you something, you follow your gut. I've made some of those that have been incredible, but I've also made some questionable ones, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So it's interesting, this idea of running a business and leading your business with intuition, because I think if you're in a good place, it's easy to lead with your intuition. But if you're in a place where sales are down or clients are not coming in, suddenly intuition can be very muddy and you have no idea whether to trust yourself or not. So for all those reasons and more, I'm real excited to share the conversation I had recently with Alyssa Williamson, who is a business coach and mentor. She actually has built up a couple successful businesses as a founder and a marketing strategist, and she actually experienced burnout pretty bad. She shares about that here in this conversation, and it even more so solidified the reason that you want to build a business around you and around your intuition. Now, she's got some really tactile and practical things that she's learned that she shares here today. So I'm really excited to hear what takeaways you get from this one. Leave us a comment, if you would, at joshhall.co/369. All of the show notes and links that we mentioned here are going to be found the show notes page there is going to have all the links that we mentioned here in this one, joshhall.co/369. Zip over there after this, leave us a comment. I'm sure Alyssa would love to hear from you. You can connect with Alyssa at her website, alyssawilliamson.com. She's active on Instagram, and she does have a free Raising Your Rates masterclass, it's actually Raising Your Revenue. It's a free masterclass if you want to pick that up. If you like what she has to say in this one and you want a little more, we'll have the link there to her free masterclass on raising your revenue. And again, all about intuition and trusting your gut in your business. I really enjoyed this one. I hope you do as well. joshhall.co/369 is where to go to leave us some feedback. And without further ado, here's Alyssa. Alyssa, it is so good to have you on here. We were joking before we hit record, there's probably 100+ topics that we could dive into for a decent amount of time, but you seem to have a lot of passion and insight on some of the mindset things, particularly like roadblocks. And something that we discussed before getting into this was almost like intuitive roadblocks and maybe some things that come up that make us our own worst enemies. So have you seen that to be the case with all entrepreneurs, or is it worse for creatives and designers?
That's actually a really interesting question. I would say, I think it's definitely an aspect of being human that there's a point where we'll judge ourselves and doubt ourselves. But I'd say creatives, especially, it's actually, we'll probably dive into this a little bit more, but there's not only our own lifetime subconscious blocks and beliefs, but like past generations are passed down too. And so healers have this where they can't accept, like healers had this old tradition of they couldn't accept money. And I think creatives have a bit of that too. It's like, I'm doing my art for my passion. I can't accept money for this. And this is like old, long standing beliefs. So yes, there's a lot lot for us to work through as creatives, as well as just being human and business owners.
Hereditary money problems and mindset problems. That's fascinating and terrifying. It's interesting because, I mean, I don't know how much of the previous generations were able to be creative like we can be now with the internet and with literally anything. I mean, you could sell literally anything. I don't know. That's very interesting. Like, how many people were artists in, the 1900s and had the ability to charge or not charge? I wonder. I guess that's interesting. Yeah.
And there's thousands of years, like going back to the Romans and Greeks, like there was sculptures and art and mosaics. And then you got to the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, and there was probably a lot less going on. So there's been different periods too, where there's been more art and then less.
Yeah. And I guess I was thinking more in the context of like our grandparents and great grandparents and what they like their mindsets and how that trickles down. It is interesting. We're starting off with this, particularly when it comes to our own roadblocks. And I think I mentioned to you, like, I feel like a good topic for this is kind of just the core idea of that we're our own worst enemies a lot of times. Yes. as creatives, especially when it comes to charging and pricing and all those good things. But I did notice my grandpa passed away a few years back, and in his funeral, there were some things that were talked about that I wasn't actually totally aware of, about how he really enjoyed teaching, and he had like a wood shop class. I think it was like a workshop wood class. Say that a few times. And he really enjoyed teaching. And then I was like, and he was a little bit entrepreneurial, even though he was a military guy. So it kind of was interesting. It perked my interest. And I was like, oh, wow, I actually share a lot more with my grandpa than I thought I did. In the way of entrepreneurship. So for good or for bad, that makes sense.
And it's interesting. Yeah. Those things that you don't know about family members until they've passed away. And you're like, oh my gosh, there are all these things we could have talked about that I didn't even realize.
Yeah. But it's like the timeless stuff, because obviously he wasn't a web designer in the 70s, but he did enjoy teaching, and he did enjoy like certain aspects of things that are timeless. So I want to dive into this more. I think it would be cool though to get just a little bit of your backstory and what led you to this point where what are you now? What do you call yourself now? Are you a mindset coach? Are you a business coach? What's kind of your title? If you had to say
I say business and intuitive success coach, but the mindset piece is also a huge part of it. So I have like a trifecta of intuition and mindset is one tripod leg, business systems and marketing strategies is another, and then high performance habits. And so the goal is shifting you as the business owner. How you show up will affect how your business grows.
I like that holy trinity of business success with mindset, system, habits. That's genius. That's beautiful.
And it all came from my own experience. So I started my business. I was thinking I went way back. I taught myself to program websites when I was 12 years old, like way back in the 90s when there were like, Google just started. And so I'd started that, and that was sort of my first indicator. That was my first business. And then I went to college, studied computer graphic design, and started my business. I got clients. I graduated May of 2009, started getting some clients, but I already had clients in college, and went official 2010, self-employed. It was also because no one was hiring 2009. I was looking for work. No one was hiring. Everyone's like, oh, come back when you get more experience. And I was like, I spent all my time job hunting. And then I started getting clients, and I was like, why am I trying to find a job when people are paying me? Let's focus on this side of my business. And talking about things running in the family. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My parents were consultants, self-employed. So it was sort of like, why am I trying to be an employee? Like, that's the weird thing in my family. Let's go be an entrepreneur. And so the biggest thing is what I find, and I know because I live this, is when you first start your business, you're like, okay, I need to set a money goal. This is how I know I'm going to be successful. And so, like, what do you do? Okay, 10K months. That's my first sign of success. And so that's what I was pursuing. Hit it my second year in business, getting consistent 10K months. But I didn't know all of the other pieces, like, oh, now I need to raise my rates, or now I need to be more selective in clients. And I was just burning out, overwhelming. I was all by myself. I was like, okay, I built this business. And so this is my first, looking back now, my parents were immigrants. My grandparents were immigrants. I had this immigrant mindset. If you work really hard, you're going to be successful. I was living it, but I was working really hard, working 80-hour weeks, doing all of this time, putting all of this in. And I went through some shifts. I had a business partner for a while, went back on my own, built my business to $250,000 years. And then I just didn't enjoy it anymore. I was like, I built my business to what I wanted to achieve. I've got the recurring income. I've got all these projects and clients I used to enjoy, and now I don't. And it was about this time that I moved. I moved from the Bay Area up to Eugene, Oregon. And I was like, you know what? I'm just cutting out all the things I don't want, cutting the clients that I no longer can serve, the projects that no longer serve me, that no longer bring me joy. And that was sort of the start of it. That was when I started diving into mindset too. I actually did some theta healing training. So I started using that to shift my own subconscious blocks. In Oregon, shifting my environment from the rat race of the Bay Area up to Oregon, where it's a lot calmer and quieter. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to be working all the time. I could take a Friday off. Like, part of it is the environment you're living in too. And what is everyone else doing? And then I came across this intuitive success coaching program. And I was like, I know I'm intuitive and I know I ignore my intuition. My intuition was like, do this. And so I did that program. And at the end of it, I was like, oh my gosh, I've finally traveled for the first time in 5 years. I am no longer working 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Like, I'm stopping work at 3 p.m. and I'm still making more money than I was before. Like, these are all the pieces that are coming together. And so it was this combination of doing my own mindset work, connecting to my own intuition, and then really discovering what I wanted to create in my business.
So I want to dive into intuition here, but I have to ask first, is it fair to say that you achieved your business goals and you had set up business goals, but you didn't set up lifestyle goals?
Yes. And that is my big sort of proponent as a business coach now, is like, let's choose your lifestyle first and then have your business support that, whether that's whatever the income is, whatever the way your days look. That's how we work now.
I really love that idea. I think it's super important, especially we're having this conversation right in the beginning of the new year. And as people are goal setting and thinking about the year ahead, I still primarily base my stuff off of an annual revenue goal, but it is based around my lifestyle. Like, I've chosen the lifestyle and the schedule I want to keep to and the type of work I want to do. And then how do I support this? Well, it's this revenue goal, this annual goal. But
yes, and that's exactly it. Because you need a number to know what you're achieving, but you can't just be like, I want to hit $250,000 years. No, I want to hit $500,000 year this year. And it's like, well, what are you sacrificing to get that? And what is it really getting you?
Yes. And I think that's why it's so important to think lifestyle first. I totally agree, because you can have a nice revenue goal, even 6 figures for somebody starting out, for example. 6 figures is often the key metric to success as far as being able to support yourself in the States. But then the question becomes, after that, in particular, if you have a revenue goal, well, number one, what are you going to do with a certain amount of revenue? But also, I've found it's like, I almost don't recommend choosing a revenue goal until you look at your offers and make sure those are matched up perfectly. Because if you have offers that require you to kill yourself on time, and then your revenue goal is just amping that up, then your only resource is just more time to be able to get to those goals, which sounds like is probably what you experience. Like, you have to kill yourself working 90-hour weeks in order to hit a certain goal.
Yeah. And I looking back, what would have really have helped me was a business coach, knowing, hey, look, it's time to raise your prices. You're a bit more experienced now. But I needed that confidence. And I was fresh out of college, and suddenly I had this 10K months, and I was like, okay, but now what? I've got no experience or no know-how of what I want to do next. And yes, all the things I teach now are what I learned and wish I had back then when I started out.
How long did you go from, because it's honestly understandable, and I think pretty cool that you got to your goal of 10K months in a couple of years, but then the hope would be that you really start to work on the mindset stuff and get it down to where you're not burned out. But it sounds like you really needed to completely change your scenery and change your environment and change everything. How long were you in business until you hit that point where you had to move and just, go through, it sounds like a pretty big pivot?
So that was officially started 2010, hit 10K months 2011, and I moved 2017. But in that time, I had a business partner. I explored building an empire and having this team to like do all the things. And through that journey is when I learned that, you know what? I don't enjoy an empire. I would rather be boutique, hands-on with all my clients. And so there's benefits to going the solo route and there's benefits to going the agency route. And so my opinion is there's a path that's perfect for you, but there's not one path that you have to do. Like it's finding what you desire. And that's where connecting to your intuition comes in. What do you want in your life? And then you pick your business.
Yeah, I found just getting to know more high profile entrepreneurs and business owners and agency owners now over the years. I've seen a lot of people who have admitted to, in short, they haven't used this verbiage, but in short, an empire like an agency can often be golden handcuffs if you have just created something that you hate basically to show up for. Are you familiar with the 7-year itch terminology or the 7-year?
I've heard it. Yeah, but not in depth.
It just like, it's something that I didn't really pay any attention to until I found out to be pretty dead on with my experience. And I've seen in others as well. And you just alluded to it. It was about 7 years, it sounds like, before you really had to switch things. I started my web design business and in 7 years started my passion project at joshhall.co. This is year 7 of being in joshhall.co. And now my big focus is on Web Designer Pro and building the community. So I'm just curious. I didn't know if you had any intuition yourself on the 7 years, how interesting that is.
Yeah. And so, it really is. And then it became about of other circumstances too, but it was like, okay, I just need to get out. I want to go live somewhere else. I want to experience another piece of life. And, part of it was my family is from New Zealand. And so going to Oregon, I was like, oh, this reminds me of New Zealand. Like I get a taste of that without leaving the country.
That's cool. And again, I don't think everyone needs to base their goals or their lifestyle every 7 years, but it is kind of interesting. It's more and more this like 7-year period seems to ring pretty true. And maybe that makes sense if you're building a business. It probably takes 7 years to get to the point where you build it, you grow it, you scale it in a way that works for you. And then that's, in a lot of cases, not always, but that's often a 7-year period. But I do love that you followed your intuition. So I want to dive into that. Intuition. What is because this gets a little woo-woo for me, and I'm not sure what like intuition is compared to mindset. What is the difference between your intuition and mindset? All the things that have to do with the feeling of business in particular.
Great question. So intuition is sort of, and I guess that they both deal with your subconscious, but your mindset are the beliefs that you have, that your subconscious has. Like mine was, if I work really hard, I'll be successful. Like, then I'm going to live that. That's just my subconscious beliefs. Some people are like, it's hard to make money, or it's not safe to have money, or there's a lot of unworthiness or worthiness beliefs. And these beliefs control the way you live your life, the habits, the way you show up. So for example, someone can make a ton of money, yet they never have enough money at the end of the month because somehow they spend it all. Whereas another person may show up as they just aren't making that money. And so they're also in money lack at the end of the month. And so there's different ways that your subconscious protects you because it thinks if you live outside of this belief, something dangerous is going to happen. Like you're going to die. Like it's this primal piece of our mind, and it only knows the now. So it thinks everything is happening now. So that's where you can use it to your benefit. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But mindset is really the beliefs and the thoughts that are holding you in the programming. And you can connect to that by connecting to your body. Same with your intuition. But your intuition is more of like, you say your expanded self or your higher self. It's this part of you that knows your purpose and your passion. And again, you want to connect to your body, sort of go into your heart. And most people feel it in their gut. Some people feel it in different ways. Some people hear things, sometimes see things. I just feel a sensation in my body. Like I'll get a tingling up my spine. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is full truth, spot on. Or for taking action, I'll be like, here's a thought just pops into my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm super excited about that. So it's positive emotions are also tied to things that are coming from your intuition. Whereas your subconscious and your ego, your conscious mind, is often where the fear comes from and the doubt and the I can't do that. You start overthinking things.
It seems to me by that overview that intuition would be correct. But is there ever a time where intuition is wrong, where you follow your intuition and it's like, that was a bad idea?
Not usually. And there can be, but usually it's for your best self. Like usually it's like, oh, you're sitting with a client and you're like, this doesn't feel great, but you know what? I need the money. So I'm going to, and this is an easy project. So I'll take the client. And that gut feeling of like, there's something not right here. And then this is like the biggest headache client ever. It's usually more when you don't listen to your intuition that you're like, oh, that was my intuition. I should have listened at that time.
Got it.
But it can be things like, oh, I'm super inspired by this. I'm going to like do a marketing post or send out a newsletter, and you suddenly get a whole bunch of responses back. And it was just something written from inspiration and creativity. Or it's waiting for a big part of it is just when you're designing too. Instead of, because I was I've got so many projects, force my way through. I skipped lunch breaks. I skipped, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, no, let me just finish this project. Oh, let me finish this project. And like 2 hours later, I'm like, I really have to go to the bathroom now. And it was like, I was just pushing through so hard. I did not have time. And that was my, I was in fight or flight mode, hustle culture mode. Whereas to come up with creative designs, you need that space. You need that you go on a walk and then suddenly you get an idea and you're like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing design. And you pop it out in like 10 minutes. Whereas when you force it, it could take 2 hours. And so it's pieces of that, recognizing how to create space for your intuition and creativity. And then recognizing, and sometimes that's what you need to do, recognizing, oh, I didn't listen to my intuition. And this is what happens. Now I need to start listening more.
So it sounds like just right there, it feels like what commonly happens in hustle mode or stressed out mode, or if you're just focused on a certain monetary goal and you're neglecting everything else, it sounds like the intuition just gets buried essentially, right? If you're just,
yes.
Yeah. If the behaviors and the habits are not aligned with intuition and what is good for you, and that's going to help you move forward sustainably, it sounds like intuition is probably the easiest thing to get buried.
Yeah. And it's just and I talk about this with clients, like when your nervous system is just dysregulated, you shut down your fight or flight mode. You can't connect with people. You're in your basic brain survival mode. It's where you write those emails that when you look back and you're like, oh, that sounded really cold. I didn't mean to be cold. I was just so focused on writing something and getting it out. Like you don't connect with people. You're not very creative. You're just blinkers on trying to survive. And so the biggest thing is creating spaciousness in your day, having space, having time. And a lot of people, and this sort of goes into a habit, a lot of people go to bed late, wake up at the last possible minute, rush all morning, and rush to work. Whereas if you went to bed a little bit earlier, got a full 8 hours of sleep, wake up a little bit earlier so you've got time in the morning. Say you've got 2 hours of time in the morning. You get to eat, get ready, sort of have a morning routine, and then head into your day focused on what you really want to create. You're more of a high performer, you're more creative. And so there's all these different pieces that tie together to listening to your intuition, to doing the mindset work, to really showing up the best that you can in your business.
So practically, I'm really thinking about this intuition thing because as you earlier mentioned, like people feel intuition differently. I've always notoriously kind of felt it in my gut, in the feeling of like, this feels right, or this feels wrong, or this feels like this is a good decision, or this feels like it's a bad decision, or something that I know I'm just going to take this on just for the money or something like that. And this is very, very timely too, because I just released at the time of recording this with you an episode about my business rebound that I had. 2024 was the best year to date I've ever had, but 2022 and 23 were down years. And the reason I mentioned that is I really leaned into this intuition thing, like deeply. And
awesome.
One of the things that started the rebound for me was an intuition of changing my business model and pivoting from course sales to membership, Web Designer Pro. And the reason I say that is it was not an easy pivot. It felt right in my gut. I knew my customers so well. I knew what was working. I did a lot of things that I would do differently in the midterm of when I launched it and how I sold it and making it more clear. But all that to say, I feel like I obviously last year showed I made the right decision, but it was a very painful pivot at first. If you had talked to me a few months into making that decision, I probably would have said, I don't know. I may have just blown up my whole business. So
Yeah.
How does that work? I mean, I guess it's almost like delayed gratification with intuition. How have you seen that to be pretty common where your intuition may seem like a bad decision at first, but it's actually best for the long term? I mean, did you experience that when you moved? Was it tough? Did you have a revenue drop, but then things evened out? I'm just wondering how many situations, or I'm wondering if my situation is pretty common to where the right move based off of your gut feeling is not a short-term right move.
Mm-hmm. And that's where there's a couple like steps to it too, but definitely like it took you in the right direction, but the how to get there wasn't very clear. And so maybe looking back, you're like, oh, I could have done things better. And so, yeah, it led you on the path, but it wasn't the easiest. And maybe it could have been like, if you'd been more active with your intuition, maybe you could have checked in with your intuition along the way and found some of the answers sooner. But I'm sure that's the thing you have to actively do. That's what I had to learn to do is like, how do I check in with my intuition, with my business decisions to keep moving forward? And part of it is just a faith and a trust. This just feels right. And just feeling that in your whole body and moving forward with that trust of I'm making the right decision. Whatever happens in the current moment is helping clear the way for it. And sometimes you have to clear stuff too. Sometimes you have to release clients or services that are no longer serving you. Sometimes it's other areas of your life. Decluttering is a part of the process too of just making the room for the new that you're growing into.
It's funny, as we're kind of peeling back the layers of this intuition onion, I'm realizing like the majority of coaching I do inside of my community, because I do have a coaching element to focus on the coaching tier. And most of the conversations I have with those members, because we do talk a little more in depth about their business and their offers and their pricing, it's a lot of intuition stuff. Case in point, when people are deciding what they want to do on top of their website design services, it's mostly intuition that I found, because a lot of people are like, I love SEO. I really enjoyed it. I want to do that. But then some members I've coached have been like, I know I should probably do SEO, but I just don't like it. And I've always been quick to say, if you don't like it, don't do it. Hire it out. Like focus on what you like. And I guess that's more of an intuition thing. I didn't really think about it like that, but
yeah. And it's sometimes it comes through without us actively, intentionally realizing. And then once you're aware of it, you can just superpower. It's really a superpower as a business owner once you can pay attention to that. And I talk about that with clients too. I'm like, and that's why one of the first pieces I walk them through is activating their intuition and really connecting them with their purpose and passion. Because what you're passionate about is what you're going to have more fun doing in your business. It's what you're going to attract people to more easily. You're just going to talk about it and it's going to be easy. But when you're like, oh, I should do SEO because it's a great income revenue and I don't really enjoy it, but I'll force myself to do it. Like that energy is in your business now. Like this, oh, I got to do something I really don't enjoy. So yeah, that's perfect.
No, that's great. So what are other ways we can, I guess, using your terminology, connect with our intuition? I don't know. Is this like a muscle that you build over time? Practically, is it just, like you said, allowing yourself to have space to think and to write out your goals? Yeah. What are like the practical things we could do for someone right now who wants to like, all right, I really want to get in touch with my intuition, essentially? Like, how do you do that practically?
Yeah. And the great thing is it's really easy. We're all born with our intuition. It's just not something that society really talks about a lot. And so we've just sort of squashed it down. So as simple as like, you could be like, when you're going for a drive, like, should I go left or right? If you're going for a walk, should I go left or right? Like just play, like connecting with your intuition. So as you said, it's like building a muscle. Build this relationship with your intuition. Should I have this for breakfast or that for breakfast? Should I have both? Like just start with small little decisions where you're like, what feels good to me right now? And start building on that. So it could be little decisions, what you wear, what you're eating. Although at the same time, the more decisions you have to make, there's decision fatigue too. And that's a whole mindset thing of you stop making decisions at the end of the day because you made too many at the beginning. So make it fun and easy. When it's fun and easy, then it's not another chore. Not like, okay, yeah, I got to start practicing my intuition today. How am I going to force myself to do that? It's more like, oh, what can I do? What can I pick today that's going to be fun? Am I going to walk this way? Am I going to walk that way? Am I going to do this or that? And it can be in business too. Should I work on this project first or this project? Should I, like, if you're making a decision in business, let yourself do that. This is more like subconscious work, but I like muscle testing where you can ask your subconscious yes and no questions. Are you familiar with muscle testing?
No.
So I love this. This is a tool I learned in theta healing, but they use it in a lot of modalities and there's some different ways to do it. So I love giving people this resource. So muscle testing is you're asking your subconscious yes or no questions. So what you do is you stand up and you face north. So you have to know which way north is. You have to be well hydrated. So make sure you just had a drink of water. And then you close your eyes. And the first thing you do is just orientate yourself to yes and no. You could say, show me yes, or you could say, what is this yes? Or my name is Bob, and you want a yes or no question. So yes, you should lean forward. No, you should lean backwards. If you're not getting a definite yes and no, make sure you're hydrated, check that you're properly facing north. And then keep moving forward. And sometimes the strength of the yes and the no will like knock you over as you're standing. But it's just another little way that if you're like, oh, I don't really feel my gut, I don't feel a yes and no in my body, you can get a physical manifestation of this response. So you can actually ask your intuition or subconscious questions.
Is that where people may feel it in their heart more? Like we've had a lot of conversations on the podcast about like heart-led businesses, especially when people are doing something passionate versus, like again, mine's kind of more out of gut response and the feeling of just like I can just sense, like my whole body, I can sense like that felt good or I did that and it was nice, but it didn't feel great. And this is really, really important too, I think, in situations like I went through where you are in a bit of a stressful situation where the numbers are going down and I feel like it can be easier to neglect your intuition because you may feel like my intuition got me in a bit of a jam here. So all that to say, like and it may just be a part of maturing as a business owner, but I had a lot of advice thrown at me in those couple years. Some was really good advice and there actually wasn't any bad advice because all of the strategies I talked about with people could work, but I had to trust my own gut with my own lifestyle goals, my own calendar goals.
What works for you? And there's great strategies out there, but it's like, what's the strategy for you? And so, so the part of the path to your gut is through your heart. So you like put your consciousness into your heart and then drop it down to your gut because your intuition is based in your gut, but people feel it in different places. So it could be just noticing, oh yes, when I get really lit up and I feel this like excitement in my chest and my heart, that could be my intuition. And when I feel this heaviness, sort of like sinking feeling, that could be the no. But there's a difference between dread and fear and a no from your intuition.
If someone is burned out and stressed out and burning the candle at both ends, whether they are killing it financially and things are going great, but they're working 90 hours a week like you are, or maybe they are in a stressful part, I would imagine this is probably like one of the hardest things to do is to get back in touch with your intuition, right? If it's like we talked about, if it is buried by, all these other circumstances.
Yeah. The one thing you need to do is the hardest thing to do. So often it's like, oh, the one thing I need to do, I need to take a break and go for a walk today. And that's the thing that you're too busy to do. Or, oh, I need to spend time on my CEO time today. And you're too busy and you break that appointment with yourself because a client calls or an emergency comes up. So it's often those things that are really important, but somehow you never get around to doing them. And so it's being able to prioritize that no matter what. And the thing is, it is hard. When you're stressed out, you're like, I don't have time to take a break. I don't have time to get more sleep. I spent 3 months getting 4 hours of sleep a night. And that's how I now know that like my number one priority is 8 hours of sleep a night. Well, I got a 13-month-old who never sleeps. So we're trying to figure out her sleep issues still. So I can't control that. But I go to bed early enough that if I was to sleep the whole night, I would get 8 or 9 hours because I know that affects every aspect of your life. Your income, your creativity, your health. And so sometimes you have to put faith in someone you trust, like there's thought leaders out there like Brendan Burchard, Oprah, all of those people. Sometimes you have to just trust other people's stories of trusting their intuition or listening to things, and then just jump in ahead and do that. Or like a mentor, like clients who work with me, I can share plenty of stories of when I pushed through, or versus when I listened to my intuition, made it easy. And once they start to experience it, once you have that first win, you're like, oh, I listened to my intuition and this went really well. Or, oh my gosh, I stopped and took a walk today and then I got this brilliant insight. Like you start then building your own proof. So it can take time. And sometimes it's really like business owners resist it. They're like, I don't want to do that. I don't have time to stop. I don't have time to take a break. I don't have time to do these things. That's the thing you need to do.
That's fascinating about leaning on coaches or mentors or influencers, whatever term you want to use, to listen to their intuition and kind of follow their ripple effect, if you will. Of course, I imagine
find other people's proof.
Yeah, other people's proof. This could go very badly, of course, if you're, trying to live someone else's dream that is not your dream.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know, especially parentpreneurs like yourself and myself, there's a lot of high-profile entrepreneurs that people model themselves after who do not have your life situation, who don't have kids. Like I've notoriously said, I have a daughter with special needs. We have 3 kiddos under 6. That is a very different situation than I think any other entrepreneur I follow. So I always keep that in mind, like what is working for them as far as their output and what they're doing on social media, on podcasting and YouTube and coaching isn't probably going to align with my schedule because they don't have my situation. But I do like that. That's just kind of a word of warning for modeling something after somebody else. But I do like that idea of, I guess, particularly if you're kind of stuck with intuition, find some proof, get a quick win, and move forward. That's kind of what I try to help people with when they're in a bind, is just get a quick win, get a little momentum, a little bit of confidence boost. And that seems to like settle the whole feeling of mindset and intuition from there when you just get on the positive momentum.
Yeah, you just need that one positive thing. Otherwise you're in this negative spiral over and over again. And it's not always like following them, but it's just like, they're like, oh, look, they trusted their intuition and it worked out for them. I know that at least for some people, following their intuition leads to great successes. And it's just building up that trust, even if you're not like, even if they're doing a different thing, but just like, oh, look, here's an example of someone following their intuition and look at where it led them. And building up that just bank of, okay, there's something to this intuition thing. Let me start trying it out.
Is that, this is fascinating to me, just this intuition stuff. So sorry, I'm just really diving deeper into this because this is, it's really important in business, but I'm just thinking back through just my life experience and when I felt that intuition. I got laid off from my job as a cabinet maker around that same time that you started your business. 2009 is when that happened. And then they called back nearly a year later and offered me the job back. And it was honestly stupid for me practically not to take the job back because I was doing side jobs. It would have been stable income and everything else. But my gut told me and my intuition told me, like, if I go back, I'm probably going to have a really hard time getting out of being a cabinet maker for $11 an hour. My intuition said, started doing freelance, started enjoying some design, keep on going with that. Does intuition, is there like, is it based off maturity, age? When does intuition, or can a 5-year-old have intuition? Like
kids have the strongest connections to their intuition because they don't have society's beliefs coming in of, oh, that's not possible. Oh, this. And yes, they've got a little bit of a fantastical mind to it. Like, oh, anything can happen. But they're sort of just living their intuition. Oh, I want this. Oh, I desire that. Let me go after it. Whereas as adults, we're like, that's a lot of work, or that's not realistic. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to try.
Interesting. So it's harder to get back in touch with your intuition potentially when you're, I'm roughed up from life or business.
That's the biggest thing I teach my daughter is like, trust your intuition. Here's how to listen to it. Like as things come up, we'd be like, what does your intuition say? So that was a lesson for me. The tech world is very masculine. The business world is very masculine. I didn't really think about my intuition in business until I was surrounded by a bunch of successful female entrepreneurs. And this was it was through Mary Kay. And it was a time in my life where I was like, I just need more female support. And they were always like, what does your intuition tell you? And it was the first time I was like, I've never heard anyone talk about intuition in business before. And I'm like, all these successful women around me are like, what's your intuition say? What's happening? And I'm like, this is something I really need to pay attention to. And that was before my move. So that sort of like was a stepping stone that triggered it. But I find that, women were talking about it more. And now I think it's a bigger part of the conversation. Like you're talking about it now, you notice when you listen to your intuition.
I agree. I do think, that's very interesting. I think you're totally right. And I think it's because it wasn't talked about in the agency world in particular. I mean, so many agency owners, and we're already past the time where so many have come out talking about how burned out they were through the early thousands into the 2010s. It was a boom for agencies and digital marketers and all the things. But by now it's like the few agency owners who have lasted through that, regardless of how big the agency is, probably had an emphasis on sustainability, or maybe they were more experienced in business at that point. But I think you're totally right. I think because things like intuition, mindset, sustainability, and none of this stuff, from my perspective, was really in the conversation. And I totally agree. And it makes sense that, female entrepreneurs are probably going to talk about their feelings and talk about things with heart and mind, whereas a lot of dudes sitting around on cigars are going to be like, how much money we make? Let's work on profit and this and this. It sounds sexist, but I get it. It's totally true. Like I've never hung out with a bunch of entrepreneurial dudes, and intuition, I guess we've talked about it in some ways, but it's not the same verbiage that you might find.
It's like, oh yeah, this just felt right. Or
stuff like that. So no, that makes sense. And it's interesting to hear that we almost go backward on the spectrum of intuition, where it's like harder to get in touch with yourself versus, I mean, look, the prime example, we just got through Christmas season. Elf is the prime example. Elf's, have you seen it? Are you an Elf fan?
No, what, the movie?
Yeah.
Probably once. I don't do very well with cheesy comedy.
Okay, dang it. Well, how dare you? It's not too cheesy. But there is a character there. Elf's real dad is a children's book like publisher, and he's just completely lost himself. Like there's no fun, there's no joy. He's just this grumpy, money
sort of like
guy.
Hook too.
Kind of. And one of the big benefits of the whole movie, if you decide to watch it again, is that he changes completely at the end. He's like, he goes back to being himself, almost like the intuition thing. So just a practical example of how like somebody later on who has neglected intuition, it gets harder and harder to get back to that. So I just find that very interesting.
Well, it's almost a piece of like, this is another aspect of it, is masculine energy and feminine energy. Masculine is the action, the doing energy. The feminine is the being, a lot of the intuition, the taking and getting inspiration to then take action. And it's not that one's better than the other. You can't be full feminine energy all the time, just waiting for inspiration to float down and hit you. But it's best if you can make that space to listen to your intuition, get inspiration, and then you go take action, rather than just trying to take action blindly. Like, what inspires me? What lights me up today? Okay, this project, I know it's at the bottom of the list, but I really, really want to do this project right now. Go do it. And you'll get it done so much faster. It'll probably come out way more amazing. And then you can dive into the next project that's on your list with higher energy. So it's learning how to balance, if that's another way to look at it. Okay, am I in my masculine energy of doing right now, or my feminine energy of creating and noticing and appreciating and percolating ideas?
That's interesting. I think for people who are in the ready, fire, aim camp, common entrepreneurial trait where you're like, I have an idea, let's go. And it's like, oh, I didn't plan or think about this or even notice if it felt right. So for those, like, it's a good reminder. But to the opposite point, and again, not that either one of these are bad or right or wrong or bad or good, but there is a camp of people who just overthink and just feel for so long, but there's no action. And it's like, you know who's not feeling is your mortgage company, who's billing you for their payment that month. Like there's a time where you've got to do something, you've got to act. So I do like that challenge and a reminder to have a little bit of balance between feeling and thinking and also acting and doing.
They both have a purpose, and it's not like you need to be all feminine or all masculine, but it's just finding what's the right time and what's the right. There's seasons too. There's seasons in your life where you're going to be more all this energy. And then there's seasons where you're like, oh, I wish I had that energy. Where did it go?
Yeah. How do you balance it? I mean, I kind of figured we would talk about this idea of like energy. Cause I mean, gosh, man, is that important through every aspect of the business, with how you show up, with how you sell, with how you come across on podcast interviews or videos or social media. How does this all translate to, or maybe a more succinct question too, as far as like energy, how do you protect that when things are not going well, for example?
Yeah. First thing is noticing it. That's the first thing you can do, is just notice, because it's easy to get in that negative spiral of, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm like, you could be like, I'm so stupid, like, or they're so awful, like ranting on someone else. And so just noticing that, oh, look, I'm in a really negative space right now. And naming the emotion. So naming the emotion gets you back sort of into your logical brain and out of just the emotions and dwelling in that negative. And then just changing focus. You can't always, and this is sort of a piece of law of attraction, you can't always be like, oh, I'm in this negative, dark space of hatred and rage or just frustration. And you can't be like, oh, I'm going to be happy and joyful in 5 minutes. But just changing your focus. Take a walk. Take to some deep breaths. You can. So the cool thing is our body can control our emotions and our emotions can control our body. So you can then take some slow, deep breaths, get back into rest and digest mode. So when you're stressed out, you have short, fast breaths. If you take, it's either box breaths, if you do 4 breaths in, 4 hold, 4 out, exhale, 4 hold, or you do a longer exhale than an inhale, that will help calm your nervous system down. So it's noticing, naming the emotion, and then just shifting your emotional state to try and get to a more neutral place. And often it is moving your body. Like you're all in your head in this emotion. Get out, get fresh air, nature, go ground your feet in the earth if it's a nice time of year. Do something to just shift, even for 5 minutes. If you're like, oh, I don't have time to calm down, 5 minutes will change everything in your day.
That's great advice. Very sage advice, especially as I was thinking about like in summer of 2023, when things were probably the darkest that I felt, with the business numbers really dropping and some stuff that we went through on the personal side. My energy was at a point where I'm a naturally happy state person, but I was being grumpy. Even my wife said, like, you've been complaining a lot and kind of grumpy. It's not normal. That's kind of how I released it. I wasn't like a raging maniac, but I was just a more grumpy, started to get a little cynical version of myself. And I totally agree. It was like getting physical and changing my state as much as possible to help, because the reality is we all know business is a roller coaster. So you have to expect high times and low times. But in those low times, I really love this principle and idea of just getting to baseline. Like, understandably, unless you're a really good actor, not too many people are going to be super depressed and angry and then have a client call and be like, hey, how's it going? Everything's great. Because
well, then that's fake anyway. Like, it's not a real happy positive unless you literally can do that. But but that is sometimes.
If you can get that baseline, I really love that idea.
And sometimes it is. Sometimes you have a great client call and suddenly you end it and you're like, oh, I'm in a good mood again. And so it was that shift. It was changing your direction and focus onto this client call, someone you enjoy, project you enjoy, and that can lift you out of it too. So it doesn't always mean, oh, I'm in a really bad negative state, I should cancel this client call because I'm not going to show up well. But just knowing yourself. Are you going to ruin a call from negative energy? Or are you going to be like, you know what? I like this client. Usually I'm not in a good mood now, but hopefully like I'll do what I can to show up. And then you leave the call and you're like, oh, I'm all excited again.
Yeah.
It's amazing your perspective when you can be like, oh my gosh, life is terrible. I'm a failure. My business is going in the dumps. And you have one good call, like, and suddenly you're like, oh, what was I so worried about? Like everything's the same. My project list is all the same, but now I can handle life again.
That's such a good point. I think regardless of whether somebody is extroverted or introverted, people need people, like we need each other. And sometimes it can be a client call to turn things around. I'm a big proponent of people having like some sort of support group in the way of a mastermind or something like that, where you do get supported. And like you rightly said, Alyssa, here, it's like, what was I so worried? Like, we're our own worst enemy, especially when we're in solitude and secluded. I found that to be a big thing. I think that's why I personally relied on reaching out to a lot of mentors and colleagues. And sorry, this sounds like a therapy
Which
session.
is great. Yeah.
Just as I'm practically thinking about helping people through this too, whether they're in a hard time or a good time, it is so good to lean on other people. One of my members, who was on the podcast recently, Whitney, talked about this too, where she tends to like to just be in solitude and do her work. And she started to do less and less client calls and less calls with customers. But she realized looking back that those calls were what really inspired her. And after she left those calls, she was feeling invigorated. She wasn't feeling that just being alone doing the work. Sometimes you do need that good balance. So I really, really like that idea. Again, whether you're introverted or extroverted, I mean, for me, it was like, I'm going to my networking group regardless. And I always felt good leaving that.
Well, this is, because I'm a total introvert, and I think it's also how you get your energy recharged. So as an introvert, I know I recharge my energy at home in quiet with my family. Whereas extroverts get recharged going outside. But I've had a lot of people be like, "Oh, are you you must be an extrovert." And I'm like, "No, when I'm recharged, I enjoy being around people. But to recharge, I have to go home and have my safe space." And my favorite thing is, there's this, I love just focused time. And actually, when I first started my business, one of the reasons I became such a workaholic is I was answering client calls and emails all day long, no boundaries, from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then 6 to 10 p.m. I was like, I get work done without people interrupting me. And so I would just dive into that. Whereas if I would just put boundaries up during my day and not answered calls and emails, I could have had that focus time during the day and not spread it out. But as my business evolved, like, I love the strategy. I loved I would build into my clients' programs that we would have a once a month call. So I could get an update of where they were and what was going on in their world and how I could support them, whether it was web design, graphic design, marketing strategy, because there was that piece of interaction. Like, they're my client, they're paying me. I want to serve them to the best of my ability. And so I was like, the more I know what's going on in their world, the better I can serve them. And so that was a big piece of some of what I train clients on too, is how to build their relationships stronger with their clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times calls and interactions with even clients don't need to be like a sales call. It could be more of a relationship builder, which for introverts, I know is a big deal. I'm more extroverted, but for folks on the introverted spectrum, I know the thought of like being on and selling nonstop. That's why a lot of introverts probably don't want to be realtors. So, but just because you have a call in your calendar doesn't mean that it's a sales call or a marketing call. Like
no, it can be a relationship call. This is my recurring client call each month, where I get to hear what's going on in their world and build a relationship. And that was another piece of what I did way back. Was I was young, female, and I was like, I have to be professional to get clients. And so I built up this wall, and like, I didn't share any of my personal life, and like, looking back, I'm like, why did clients choose me? It must have been my personality without any of the like personal stuff. But as I've evolved, I'm like, people choose to work with me because of who I am and my personality and knowing my life. So like, I'm friends with clients on Facebook, and they see my personal life as well as work. And then there's deeper conversations. Like, I have a client that we chat with, and the first couple minutes are just a little personal catch up. What did you do for the holidays? Like, what's going on in your week right now? Even my coaching clients, I'm like, what's going on in your world? What's a win? What did you do for fun this week? Because a lot of business owners don't have fun. So I had to start asking them, what do you do for fun each week?
That's great. I love that tip. Keeping it a little bit personal too. I think in the age of AI too, I think that's going to be one of the biggest draws is anything we can do to be a little more personalized. Doesn't mean everyone needs to put their family on social media and be an influencer, but by golly, if you can keep it a little more personal, I am a living testament to how far that can go. Especially when it comes to your vibe attracts your tribe. Like, there may be no better way to get your ideal clients than being you on how you present yourself and letting your personality come out.
And that's really it. And you want your personality to repel the people that don't want that, so that you don't deal with that, and that you attract your tribe. And so it's a little bit of coming back to intuition too, is, do you really know yourself, or are you just doing what you think society wants you to do? And part of it's gaining maturity and confidence in myself. I had to go through that journey. And now I'm like, this is my world. But when I was starting out, I was like, I'm young and female and blonde. Like there's different, like just societal expectations I feel like I have to overcome.
Is intuition basically like our compass, our guiding light?
Yes. It's your compass, your North Star to what you really, truly want in life. And so when you're connected to that, then you could know, you know what? I really want to be able to take vacations several times a year, or I want to go take a month-long vacation. And you're like, I'm feeling trapped in my business because this isn't possible right now. And so first is noticing what it is that you really, really want and desire, and then making it possible, finding a way to make it possible. What do you have to change in your business or shift? Like, do you have to just tell clients you're going to be gone for a month and build up your projects ahead of time? Or maybe you build certain systems in place, or maybe you do this or that, and finding that out. But you can't make that plan or decision until you know what you really want. Maybe you just want Fridays off every week. Like maybe you just want to end up every day at 3 p.m. Like finding what that is, finding what lights you up. What are your hobbies that you really enjoy? What do you wish you did more of? Did you really used to enjoy photography and now you don't? Like, well, I used to love art, and then design became my job. And so I stopped drawing or doing anything. And then as it comes back, like maybe you notice, oh, well, this became my job, so it's no longer my passion. What is another passion I can enjoy? Maybe you just enjoy reading in the middle of the day. Like, I think that's a luxury. I talk about helping clients find their luxuries. It doesn't have to be money. What if it was just being able to read a book for half an hour in the middle of the day? Like a lot of people, that's a huge luxury. Being able to just take a hot shower at 5 p.m. and just soak for the evening. Finding these things that light you up and refill you and make you feel like you're not just giving and giving to your business or to everything else in your life too.
Great way to put a cap on this one, Alyssa. That's awesome. That's really good advice. One final question here for you, but I want to give people a chance to pick up. I know you've got some free stuff. Where should people go to connect with you? And then I think you have a free resource too, right? Like a masterclass?
Yes. So Alyssa Williamson, ALYSSA, and then Williamson is SON.com is my website. And you'll find access to just a little bit more information. I've got several free trainings, but the main one I'll shared with you that you can put in the resources is Raising Your Revenue Masterclass. And it's really about how to bring the trifecta of mindset, intuition, strategy, and habits to increase your income, but do it in a more efficient way so you get time back and you get your life back. And then another great place to reach out to me is Instagram. I'm Alyssa Williamson _coach. And I always just love chatting. If you just want to be like, hey, I heard you on the podcast, got this question, or really enjoyed this point, I would love to hear that.
Awesome. Well, we'll have all that linked in the show notes for sure for this one, Alyssa. Final question here for you real quick, particularly to the business owner who has been at it for a while and is very far removed from their intuition. What would be like if they could do something right after this chat, right after they push pause on the podcast? What would be like an exercise or something you would recommend they do just to start the process to be a more intuition-led entrepreneur?
Definitely do some slow, deep breaths. So just getting back to your body. The problem is we get so caught up in our minds, and that connection to your subconscious and your intuition is in your body. So just spend a minute, set a timer so you're not counting, and just do slow, deep breaths. Put your feet on the ground and sort of visualize like your energy going out from your body in roots and sort of grounding to the earth. And then just ask yourself, like, what do I want to do in the next 5 minutes? What do I want to do this afternoon? You don't have to ask like a big life-changing question, but just be like, what do I want to do right now? Like, maybe I want to go get a snack. Maybe I just want to go outside and take a breath now. Like, after I've listened to this podcast, what do I feel inspired to do? And write it down if it's not something you could do right away, but at least take note of it and make sure you do it at the time when you can. Boom.
There we go. All right, Alyssa. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today and for chatting about this. This was really interesting. And I love that we're talking about this more, even as a dude entrepreneur. I'm not in the hustle crowd, but I definitely am a huge proponent of listening to your intuition and building a business that you want to show up for and doing this sustainably and not burning out. So to that, I say thank you for your intuition and your advice and all the work that you've done to be able to help a lot of folks. So thanks so much for sharing everything today.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. And I love this. And I love that it's becoming a conversation and something that people, maybe this will open a few eyes to where they are intuitive and have been ignoring it, or opening new doors to new opportunities.
Heck yeah. AlyssaWilliamson.com. And we'll have all the resources in the show notes for this one. And we'll have your masterclass linked. And yeah, definitely go check her out on Instagram. Thank you, Alyssa. Till next time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, Josh.
Big thanks again to Alyssa for coming on and sharing all about intuition and trusting your gut. Leave us a comment, if you would, at joshhall.co/369 to share any takeaways or thoughts you have based off of this one. I'll let Alyssa know to check the comments over there on the show notes. All of the links we mentioned can be found there as well, again, at joshhall.co/369. Alyssa is currently active on Instagram, and you can find her at her website, alyssawilliamson.com. And remember, she does have a free masterclass you can pick up today for completely free. It's a Raising Your Revenue masterclass that will be linked at the show notes for this one as well. All right, friends, hope you enjoyed this one. Cheers to running your business based off of trusting your gut. I hope it works for you. And I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you subscribe if you are not yet subscribed wherever you watch or listen to the podcast, because we got some doozies ahead and fun stuff ahead. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one.